Good afternoon, and welcome to the 6th Annual CEO Evolution, co-hosted by Citrin Cooperman and Rutgers Business School. Citrin Cooperman is a global tax, audit, and advisory firm, currently the top 25th largest in the United States. You can learn about the firm and the services we provide by visiting www.citrincooperman.com.
Hello, my name is Sharon Leiden. I'm the Associate Dean of Alumni and Corporate Engagement at Rutgers Business School. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 6th Annual CEO Evolution. RBS has partnered with Citrin Cooperman over these past 6 years, bringing to you successful New Jersey business leaders, CEOs, to tell their stories of success. And on the eve of Veterans Day, each year it is our honor to recognize a veteran and hero. This is our first virtual event, introducing to you some of the toughest and most successful leaders who are leveraging their experience to guide their businesses, some of the hardest hit by COVID-19 through crisis. Before we introduce our veterans and panelists, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly highlight some of the contributions with which Rutgers Business School is engaged. As one of the largest public business schools in the nation, we never stop in our drive to fulfill our mission, and we have launched more innovative programs such as the Road to Success programs that get students strong job offers to maximize the return on investments for a business degree with our public university. In addition to the high impact research and conferences like the CEO Evolution, our faculty are also applying their knowledge to help the business community and to make a positive impact during the pandemic. For example, we're helping convert several New Jersey small businesses into hand sanitizer factories and production lines for making N95 masks. Rutgers Business School has also been leading a project with the state of New Jersey to redesign and rebuild its PPE supply chains.
Today, 3 top New Jersey CEOs will be honored with the Leadership Excellence Award. They will then share their experiences leading their business through one of the toughest challenges in recent history. Their industries have been some of the hardest hit by COVID-19. They include the travel and concierge industry, the hospitality industry, and the performing arts industry. First, we will present a brief video introducing our honorees. After that, we will do a short presentation honoring today's veteran, Jeff Cantor. Stay tuned.
Leadership to me is just a constant pursuit of doing things the very best we can for our customers. I think the most important role of the CEO is managing people.
The most important thing you can do as a leader in a crisis situation is to make a decision. Decision making is the paramount critical task in leading through crisis.
Once again, I welcome you to hear the stories of true leadership with our CEO Evolution. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Michael Napolitano, a partner at Citrin Cooperman, and I'll be the moderator this afternoon. And I want to thank all the panelists for taking time out of the busy day to join us. First, we're going to start with a special recognition for this year's veteran honoree and present Jeff Cantor with the Veteran Leadership Excellence Award. Jeff is a colonel in the U.S. Army, retired, and he is the CEO of the New Jersey Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. First of all, thank you everyone for attending this, and especially to Citrin Cooperman and Rutgers Business School for sponsoring this event. I am, as you've heard, I'm the CEO of the New Jersey State Veterans Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the CEO of Lima Charlie Construction, which is a heavy civil construction company. And prior to that, I spent 32 years in the military, retired as a colonel with 3 deployments under my belt, and many, many years in the Balkans, learning how to live life. The most important thing you can do as a leader in a crisis situation is to make a decision. Decision making is the paramount critical task in leading through crisis. You know, oftentimes I'm sure everyone has heard paralysis by analysis, right? There's always something else you can look at. There's always another metric you can take a look at to see whether or not you should make this decision or not. You will likely never have the perfect solution in a crisis situation. And you have to do the best you can for the greatest amount of people. That's really the driver behind key decision making in a crisis situation. You know, we all have been affected by COVID. You know, for me as a CEO of a large construction company, nobody was putting out bids, so we weren't bidding on anything. But I had a number of employees that I had to keep employed. So I made a decision to go without a paycheck for 6 months so that my employees could be kept whole, and that I knew when things started turning around, they'd be busy and everything would work out. So it was a tough situation, but again, it was doing the right thing that helped the most amount of people. And the story I want to share with you today is something that happened to me back in February of 2004 in Erbil, Iraq, during the Muslim holy month of Eid. This was during my deployment to Iraq during the initial invasion. And on February 1st, 2004, there were multiple suicide bombers that took out 2 political headquarters of the Kurdish regional government. 55 people were killed at each location. So 110 people were killed that day in simultaneous coordinated attacks. And there were hundreds more wounded. There were body parts everywhere. They had to figure out which body parts went to which bodies. It was truly a crisis situation. So the first thing that we had to do was to do triage, number one, to make sure that those that could be helped, we were able to help initially. Also, we had to make sure the building was secure. Was it stable? Was there the threat of a secondary attack? All these things had to be considered and decided on in a moment's notice. So we had to put out security to make sure that there was no secondary attack. We didn't have helicopter support at the time, so the key decision making there was how do we save the maximum amount of life, and how to secure people with dignity. And I'll talk about that in a second. There obviously was a big logistical concern on our hands. We had to take over civilian vehicles to raise people to the civilian hospitals and the U.S. Army hospital, who only treated locals for life, limb, and eyesight situations, which this certainly was. We had to create a temporary morgue and then drive all the bodies to the actual morgue in the hospital. And it was important to act fast because you have to be buried quickly in the Muslim religion, and you have to be buried whole, in other words, with all of your body parts. So that wasn't necessarily the case here, and that's why I said it was really important to have the most amount of dignity for many of these families. Then we had to figure out, once all that initial problems were being solved, who did this and why did they do it? So that was another thing. Luckily, there was video footage, so we analyzed the video footage to see who the suicide bomber is. We identified the suicide bomber, and we determined that he was a foreign fighter from Yemen, based upon some of the tattoos that were on his body. At no time during this event could you let yourself get upset or break down. You had to be stoic. You couldn't show emotion. You just had to act with confidence. Even if you made the wrong decision, you had to act with confidence. And I went to several funerals immediately following. It took me several days to realize what I had just dealt with and the atrocities I had just seen. And so it was a difficult life lesson for me, but it taught me how to lead during an extreme and catastrophic crisis. And the factors I had to consider were my safety and those around me, medical support, resources available, logistical support, mass casualty support, the structural support of buildings, mortuary affairs, follow-on threats, identification of the perpetrator, ensuring the people and families had dignity, especially when they got buried, and then, of course, going after the people that did that. So the most important thing during that crisis was decision-making and not to become overwhelmed and paralyzed by the carnage that was in front of me. And so, those life lessons I've taken with me through every single crisis situation. Obviously, I've had very few crises like that since then, couple overseas, but nothing to that extreme degree. But I am very humbled and appreciative of the recognition of this great award. I want to thank Citrin Cooperman and Rutgers Business School for awarding it to me. And for all those out there, people out there, please hire a veteran. They make great employees. Thank you so much.
First of all, let me just thank everybody for allowing me to participate in this forum. Very grateful for the award. And first and foremost, I have to thank Jeff for his service to our country. I'm very grateful for that, Jeff. And Jeff made some great leadership points, but I can tell you a little bit about what was going on before. 2019 was the most successful year in our 3.5 decades. Was most profitable year from a service perspective. Service delivery was running at 99%, which in itself is really amazing for the type of work that we do. Right before COVID hit, in about 5 months before March, I had accepted an offer to sell the majority of the stock of the company I was staying on, and as CEO for the next 5 years. And unfortunately, after 35 years, that's what I was hoping to get to. That deal fell apart. So, right out of the gate, I'm dealing with something that's already kind of a struggle because it was a lifelong dream to be able to realize. But got through that. And then we started to notice, obviously, some of the travel bans. We went full throttle. I mean, we were doing upwards of 55 to 70,000 passenger pickups a month, down to zero. So we complete 100% revenue loss. Now we're running at about 85% revenue loss. But right after it started, the first thing that I thought of is cash, right? So we need to preserve our cash. I drew down my revolver, which I've never used before. So we're just, hoarding the cash so we can survive. We don't know how long it's going to be, obviously. We furloughed over 600 employees on both coasts. which for me, as the owner of the company for so long, that was extraordinarily difficult for me to do. We have about a staff of 100 right now operating the company. It's been a very difficult ride, that's for sure. It has not been easy, but there's been a lot of good things that have come out of this too, which I think we're going to discuss a little bit later. But the initial response was just, how do we conserve cash? And that was the most important thing at that time, so we could survive.
So, the performing arts industry, I think everyone's familiar when Broadway was shut down, but I don't think people realize how many other theaters were impacted. Tell us how you were doing pre-COVID, how you were looking for 2020, and what ended up happening after COVID hit.
I did join a theater 2 years ago and was charged with really increasing the market share of the theater, really increasing its profile, and returning it to a place of financial stability. We had unfortunately experienced a couple of deficit years in my first 2 immediate years. However, right before COVID hit, in fact, in February, we were projecting a break-even year, which in the performing arts is a challenging thing to do because often our revenues are very dependent on the ebbs and flows of a lot of things that are out of our control. So we were controlling as much as we could by being strategic about our performances, by being strategic about our expenses. And then when the governor's ruling, or rather recommendation of canceling events of more than 250 hit, it was night and day, an immediate change. We are a nonprofit organization, but we do receive the bulk of our funding from earned revenue, selling tickets, doing shows, which is what we love to do. And I saw an immediate impact on our revenue and in fact, this show that we had on March 12th went from, we lost 50% of the revenue for that show within 12 hours because people were asking for refunds and we couldn't deny them. They were scared. They didn't want to be in a large group of people, and we understood. It's been challenging since then. We remain closed, and so our revenue went from $2.7 million over 1 2-month period last year to just $200,000 in the same period this year. So a 90% drop was significant. I think the hardest thing for me was the laying off of staff, the impact it had on the staff who, we're a small staff of 35 full-time, and we had to let go half of the staff immediately. And that was difficult. We're a tight group. I think that it was an experience too. In 25 years of performing arts, I've never had to enact a force majeure clause in a contract, and I enacted it 40 times in a period of a week. So it's been a series of firsts, I think, for me. Not all of them good, but in the performing arts industry, when the show must go on, it's really a strange time when it literally cannot.
Francis, the hospitality industry has probably been getting the most attention and the hardest hit. So from your perspective, walk us through back in March. For me, I remember, I think it was right around St. Patrick's Day, that Monday, when the order came out for restaurants to close. What was going through your head when that happened and when the shutdown was actually going down?
I don't be polite for me to tell you the words that were actually running through my head right now, but I'll summarize them though. But I also want to say it's great to be on here with David and Sarah. If you go to the theater and take a limousine and have dinner at my restaurant, we're like a whole perfect evening pre-pandemic right here. And Jeff, of course, it's an honor to be here with you as well. So, but what I was thinking was this is a 6-week thing, right? This is at most, it's a 6-week thing. And, we've been through a lot. Our first restaurant we opened 28 and a half years ago on the corner of Livingston Avenue. And we have 2 restaurants. We have a wine shop, stageleftwineshop.com, was always a part of our business. We were shocked, but we knew we had to act quickly. I never thought it would last this long. As far as we were in a good position because we had just come off the best year, the best quarter, and the best 2 months. And the first quarter of this year would have been our best first quarter ever. So we were liquid. If this had happened the year after I built Catherine Lombardi for $2.5 million, it would have been a much different story for me. I mean, it happened at, timing is hard work, and there's intelligence, and then there's luck, right? And as far as luck is concerned, I think what we realized as we thought this was going to start going on longer was the first thought was, of course, cash. And I'll tell you, one of our maxims, there are 2 maxims I believe in the restaurant business. Unless you're in a place like an airport or someplace that's a franchise where you can make a lot of money quickly, because that's not the MO for restaurants. We do a lot of consulting for other people, and we always say if you're going to own a standalone restaurant or 2 or 3, you've got to own the real estate. And if you own the real estate, you have access to traditional capital, which restaurants don't, because you can put up the real estate. You have flexibility. You will find yourself to be the most reasonable landlord you can find, and that really came in handy. So we knew we were okay. And the other thing we learned from 2008, though we never missed a payment on everything or anything ever in 28 years, our working credit disappeared. I mean, it all went away. I mean, I went to Restaurant Depot to buy my groceries, to buy the food for the restaurant, and the card was declined. What we have always done is work with a local bank, and our bank is Magyar Bank, and I recommend them very highly. But the thing about whatever the local bank is, it's an ongoing relationship with that bank. So in 2008, we had come off some great years, and Mark and I made a point to meet with our banker every year and talk about where we are and what our financial position is and what our assets are. And so when we had the crash of 08, we went to our bank and said, listen, I know no one wants to talk to restaurants right now. I'm not losing money. I'm going to be fine, but I need $350,000 operating credit, and I need it in 30 days. And we got it. And again, realizing that nobody ever loans you money when you need it. So they only loan you money when you don't need it. So the first thing we did was call up our bank and say, okay, here's where we are. Here's what we can do. Here's our break even. If I have to shut down, I can tread water for a year and a half, but I don't want to shut down. I just want to make sure our credit is still good. And turned out we never needed it, but that was the first thing we did, and it sort of dawned on us that the meteor had just hit, and we better start acting like a ferret and not like a dinosaur, because T-Rex was really the king of the hill in February, but the ferret was the king of the hill right now. And so we transformed our wine shop, which had been mostly virtual, back into a physical store with a virtual lean on it. We transformed our delivery business, which we had kind of the seeds of, to be an important part of our business. And we reached out, most importantly, to our clients, with whom we had established regular contact through, thank God, Facebook and some in text and emails. And we said, here is what we can do for you, because we realized they lost the ability to go out to dinner as well. And so we had to say, how can we deliver not just food as fuel, but the fun to people's homes? And we were able to pivot quickly. And I think there was some good planning. There were some good business practices that were in place. I think we made some right decisions, hopefully keeping our heads under fire and not panicking. But there's no doubt about it that part of it's luck. And the other part of it that I have to mention, being a part of this community for so long, people, and this happened in 08 as well, people walked into that wine shop and said, I want to buy some wine. And I'm like, you normally spend $30 on a bottle of wine. They're like, I know, I would like 2 cases of $100 bottle of wine, and I knew why they were buying it. People came in and bought gift certificates that they had you can't redeem it. I'm closed, right? And so the support from the community, which we have supported through all the years, all those seeds, really, we were able to harvest those. So, I think I think all of that was our initial month and a half, 2 months, and it's humbling to see how many people helped us and wanted us to succeed, and it was rewarding that our hard work and the precautions we laid out to have more than one leg on the stool paid out, and it was also good to be just lucky and have it hit at a time where it didn't destroy us.
Thank you, Francis. So David, the common theme is most business owners have plans, contingency plans, but in this situation, it happened overnight. So I'm sure you had major challenges that popped up. As a leader, what were your objectives? What were the hurdles? What were the biggest challenges you had to deal with?
When things started, you go from, we do roughly 185 million in annual revenue, and you go to zero. There's major problems that come up, obviously. The first one that I had to deal with was our capital stack, the debt that we have, and we'd have to find a way to refinance that debt, which, as Francis said, there's nobody running out right now to have people loan money. I started that process and brought in a third party to help us with that, and then subsequently brought in another third party who's actually getting that deal done right now for us. So that was one of the biggest hurdles. But I have to tell you a quick story. During all of this, when the pandemic started and we're faced with all this crisis, and we're trying to manage through that, and something Jeff said is just so spot on. Communication is just absolutely key at that point. I had my senior management team in the conference room every day, and we were communicating about everything that we were doing. But an interesting story, we've been developing software for the past 4 years that would bring us to a level far beyond what other chauffeur companies are capable of doing today. And we are currently, I think, still the largest privately held company in our industry. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call from my chief information officer, and she said, "You can't get in the system." What do you mean you can't get in the system? She couldn't get in any system. Couldn't get in the phone system, couldn't get in our software system, which is all proprietary software. We have 2 co-locations. Everything was locked down. So we got hit by actors out of Ukraine. While we're trying to manage everything else, we're managing a ransom close to $1 million. It wasn't just the pandemic. Now we have this other problem to deal with. And I have to say that the saving grace, when the system got hit, and fortunately, they did not take any data, because we've had a lot of companies in here doing consulting work to try and figure out where it came from. We found that out, how they got into this system. But you're dealing with all these problems, and then this hits you. And the one thing that I told my staff right away was, do not show any emotion right now. You just need to get down and do what we need to do, because now we have no system. And our service is still operating. We're still operating. We're doing, roughly $2 to $3 million a month in revenue. So we have now no records that we can see. We don't know what we have in the system. So it was a big challenge. Fortunately, after 4 years of development work, we were able to get busy right away and shore up the amount of time that we would need to implement the new software, which was not ready yet. So we got our programmers working 24/7, and we were able to launch that software during the pandemic while we were getting up our other system and moving data over. So it was really challenging. And I think that one of the things for me as a leader that makes me so effective in a crisis situation, not to compare to Jeff, but my other life, I was a firefighter and an EMT. In the heart of a big city. And that gave me I learned a lot of, developed a lot of tools for crisis management through that, because just like Jeff, there's a situation there and it involves life and death. So that helped me a lot during this crisis. In fact, a tremendous amount. So, but right now, we've been able to get things done that we need to get done with our refinancing our capital stack, and getting everything in place so we can ride the storm out, which for the travel industry, I think is going to be into the first quarter of 2021 before we see a lot of movement.
And just real quick, David, when we were speaking earlier, you talked about the importance of your team. Can you just touch on that, the importance of the management team during this crisis?
Well, yeah. So they're everything. My management team, I have members of that team that have been with me over 30 years. I had, in fact, two of my executive VPs started with me in the high school work program 35 years ago. So we have an amazing story when it comes to management and to employee tenure. The number of employees, we have chauffeurs that have been here since the 80s. So we're very proud of that. And I think that comes from, I know that comes from, is the one thing that I've always tried to practice is that my life comes first. Okay. What I need to do for myself to make myself healthy comes first, because you can't be a good CEO if you're not, healthy mentally and physically. So my team is, I impress that upon them constantly. And I think that that's what creates such great camaraderie, is that we're all very focused on the business, but we're all very focused on our personal lives and the lives of our family, which I think at the end of the day, if your personal life isn't all together, what can you really do from a business?
So you're in this impossible situation, theater's closed. What actions did you take as a leader to gain momentum in a new direction, or to focus on something that is actionable during this crisis?
So much like I believe everybody, we all thought when this hit, that we really were looking at a few weeks or a couple of months at most. And it was when I was rescheduling shows for the third and fourth time, and I was hearing from my contacts in the industry that really the performing arts industry wasn't going to be back up until probably Q1 at the earliest, or Q2 of 2021 for the large shows that we do, that I realized we had to pivot. We had to find something that would allow us to utilize this time and shore up the organization so that we could continue once it was safe to reopen. And I have to echo Francis's comments about this community, because I think it's this community and their embracing of state theater that allowed the pivot that we were able ultimately to make. We had been in the middle of a capital campaign, the quiet phase of a capital campaign, for some time, and planning some serious renovation projects for the theater to improve it, make it more accessible, make it more efficient, make it the experience better. And it was through the generosity of our donors and also Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders that we were able to actually accelerate the plan. And we have actually started the construction now, and we expect to be completed by June of 2021. It's a silver lining in a way. We wouldn't have been able to shut down again after this prolonged shutdown. So it's uncertain when we would have been able to do the construction in the future, but it gives us something to do right now that is positive, that gives the staff, I think, something to focus on, gives our donors something and our audience something to focus on. We also are taking a lot of what we're learning right now and employing that in the plans. So COVID has definitely impacted our plans and what we're going to do. And so we can make sure that the theater is a place that helps to mitigate any future outbreaks of COVID or the flu or anything else in the future. But it's been really the support of the community that has allowed us to engage in this construction plan and provide a better, safer, more efficient state theater once we're out at the other end of this.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So Francis, you've been doing this a long time, you and your partner. I think you mentioned your success has been a combination of good timing and good instincts. You've been a pioneer in the industry. So tell us how that experience is helping you pivot your business today.
Look, the marketing of Stage Left and Catherine Lombardi, and now StageLeftWineShop.com, has always been it doesn't come out of an advertising idea. Our philosophy has always been with this small business that we would go on the adventure we want to go on. So that means having the meals we want to have, but traveling to the places we want to travel and bringing those stories home. And we we would have an interesting life and an interesting adventure and bring people along for the ride. And so that's led to a bunch of our innovations. I mean, we found when we first opened, 1992, you hear people say, well, it's kind of market-driven seasonal American restaurant. So every restaurant says they do that, and some restaurants actually do it, but you can't swing a dead cat. You wouldn't open a restaurant today that didn't say that. But we were the only ones before you would go to the Green Market. When we wanted to go to the Green Market, we used to go to Union Square in New York from New Brunswick, New Jersey. We would go directly to farms. And that was a new thing back then. But we did that because we loved it and we thought it was important, And that went on to estate bottled wine, some small producers. We were one of the first cocktail bars in the country. And the books that are written about how the cocktail revolution came about talk about Stage Left in New Brunswick, New Jersey. But we've always tried to do other cool new things. And some of those things, which were maybe 1% of our business or 3% of our business, but we were doing them because they were interesting, they proved to be important legs on the stool when we had to pivot. So, one of the things we've always done is once a month or so for 28 years, we've done wine dinners. But the wine dinners have never been, the national sales rep from Robert Mondavi is here to talk to you as a salesman about the company he works for. I've just never been interesting to me. We have always, because we've dealt with these small production wines, we're kind of well known in the wine world, and we have a lot of friends among the owners of the vineyard and the winemakers that have gone back for years. So our wine dinners were always the owner or the winemaker, and people who've since become famous like Paul Hobbs or George Hendry, and we were able to pivot. We figured out a way to deliver wine dinners to people's homes. We do a Zoom wine dinner. I don't know, Zoom, everyone's bored with a Zoom, but a Zoom wine dinner, which was you got 3 bottles of wine, you got 3 courses of food, which could be finished with a boiling water that you could put a bag in and a toaster oven at 475 degrees that we had all but finished cooked in the restaurant that day. And we matched 3 courses of food to 3 wines. And we've got the winemaker in from California or South Africa or Burgundy or wherever. And we had dinner together. And it wasn't a PowerPoint presentation and it wasn't an educational thing. And we all ate the same food at the same time and drank the wine at the same time and talked about it among ourselves. And other people are doing that now, but we were first. And fortunately, Forbes magazine picked us up and wrote about it nationally first. And, being first is important in this kind of a thing. So we propagated that out. And then I'm Irish and Irish American, and I do a lot of stuff back and forth, especially with the city of Belfast in Ireland. And so the Irish Echo picked it up, which is a national publication, which led another national publication. But that led a bunch of Belfast newspapers to pick it up. And so we're doing a Zoom wine dinner soon in Belfast in Ireland. Our working credit disappeared. It all went away. I went to Restaurant Depot to buy my groceries, to buy the food for the restaurant, and the card was declined. What we have always done is work with a local bank, and our bank is Magyar Bank, and I recommend them very highly. But the thing about whatever the local bank is, it's an ongoing relationship with that bank. So in 2008, we had come off some great years, and Mark and I made a point to meet with our banker every year and talk about where we are and what our financial position is and what our assets are. And so when we had the crash of 2008, we went to our bank and said, listen, I know no one wants to talk to restaurants right now. I'm not losing money. I'm going to be fine, but I need $350,000 operating credit, and I need it in 30 days. And we got it. And again, realizing that nobody ever loans you money when you need it. So they only loan you money when you don't need it. So the first thing we did was call up our bank and say, okay, here's where we are. Here's what we can do. Here's our break even. If I have to shut down, I can tread water for a year and a half, but I don't want to shut down. I just want to make sure our credit is still good. And turned out we never needed it, but that was the first thing we did, and it sort of dawned on us that the meteor had just hit, and we better start acting like a ferret and not like a dinosaur, because T-Rex was really the king of the hill in February, but the ferret was the king of the hill right now. And so we transformed our wine shop, which had been mostly virtual, back into a physical store with a virtual lean on it. We transformed our delivery business, which we had kind of the seeds of, to be an important part of our business. And we reached out, most importantly, to our clients, with whom we had established regular contact through, thank God, Facebook and some in text and emails. And we said, here is what we can do for you, because we realized they lost the ability to go out to dinner as well. And so we had to say, how can we deliver not just food as fuel, but the fun to people's homes? And we were able to pivot quickly. And I think there was some good planning. There were some good business practices that were in place. I think we made some right decisions, hopefully keeping our heads under fire and not panicking. But there's no doubt about it that part of it's luck. And the other part of it that I have to mention, being a part of this community for so long, people, and this happened in 2008 as well, people walked into that wine shop and said, I want to buy some wine. And I'm like, you normally spend $30 on a bottle of wine. They're like, I know, I would like 2 cases of $100 bottle of wine, and I knew why they were buying it. People came in and bought gift certificates that they had you can't redeem it. I'm closed, right? And so the support from the community, which we have supported through all the years, all those seeds, really, we were able to harvest those. So, I think all of that was our initial month and a half, 2 months. And it's humbling to see how many people helped us and wanted us to succeed. And it was rewarding that our hard work and the precautions we laid out to have more than one leg on the stool paid out. And it was also good to be just lucky and have it hit at a time where it didn't destroy us.
And I'm going to throw out this to everyone. We talked about lessons learned. How has this impacted you on a personal level? How has it changed your approach to work? And has it changed the view about yourself and your leadership? So I'll throw it out there to all of you.
For me personally, it's had a tremendous impact on my personal life, but in good ways. This happened once before. I did a show a few years back, Undercover Boss, and I experienced a lot of changes in my own personal life after doing that. And to me, what's happening right now, of course, I'm focused on the business, but I've also noticed that there's some things about me that I would like to focus on and work on. And that's what I've been doing. I've learned, haven't watched the news in 3 months. Now, some people might say, well, that's kind of irresponsible for a CEO. No, I have to keep a clear head. And that, to me, that's the most important thing. And the way to keep a clear head is to constantly work on myself. And improving myself, because I do that, the business improves. So for me, it's really been life-changing, I have to say.
So I would say in the live performance world, we're planning 12 to 18 to 24 months in advance. And so I've always, and in fact, if you could see behind me, I have a big calendar, but I also have had to really recognize that I need to embrace flexibility and embrace the concept that I didn't know what was going to happen next week or next month, and become much more, I guess, fleet of foot in some of my decision-making processes to react to things as they were happening, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic, as we just really didn't know what was happening and how long it was going to happen. And I think that has allowed me to be a little bit more open to new ideas. And as I think I said earlier, really embracing our opportunities and not focusing on our limitations, because we have limitations coming out of our ears right now. And I could get really bogged down in those limitations, but I'm finding ways to embrace the opportunities, and that's giving me some inspiration for what this looks like when we're done, what this looks like when we come through that small little hole to the other side. We won't look like we do now, or we won't look like we did before. And so we have to be really flexible and fleet of foot to embrace those opportunities as they come. It's exciting. It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I'm really tired of living at work. but I think that it's also inspiring and exhilarating.
Add something quickly. Something that Francis touched on was, recovery. What's it look like? One of the things that we're discussing a lot right now is that for travel, I think there's a big pent up demand. We're hearing that a lot from the companies we service. And, like the 1918 pandemic, we had the roaring 20s, right? I think the roaring 20s will be 2021. That's what I believe. And the challenge there is that you got to get people back. And some of those people might have moved on because they had no choice. And so that's something we're studying and working on a lot right now, is that preparation, that when that boom hits, I mean, think about it, a light switch could go off and I would need another, 75, 100 drivers or whatever. That's a big undertaking, to be able to ramp up and be ready for that. And I think that's probably something a lot of people think about.
I'd like to, chime in on this as well. One of the things Sarah said I am doing and one of that I'm not doing, you can't book an important act in a month, right? So Sarah's got to be planning well far ahead in a very uncertain environment. Mark and I, we have a meeting with everybody every week where we look for everybody's input, like those key people that I was talking about, and we buy lunch. We always buy lunch at those meetings because I want to sit around and talk. I have an agenda of things we want to hit, but it's an overall conversation because I'm seriously planning 2 weeks ahead. And now, because the holidays are coming, I plan Thanksgiving, I plan Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, but none of that may happen. I might be closed. I might have indoor dining open. I might not be able to seat at the bar like just happened yesterday, or maybe I'm at 25% capacity, or maybe the thing goes up and they shut me down again. So do I invest $65,000 in a tent to put outside that might or might not be necessary or might not be allowed? Everybody has to make a different decision with that, but I'm keeping my powder dry, and I military reference there for you, Jeff, but the powder dry, I think. I'm planning the next 2 weeks, but I don't know what's going to happen in 4 weeks, and I certainly don't know what's going to happen in 8 weeks. But here's what I know, and here's what we say to our staff. We know how to make sure people have a good time. We know how to make great food and wine, and we have to keep thinking about how in the next 14 or 30 days, we get that to people and we get enough people to be interested in it to buy it from us and give us their credit card number, right? So that's what I've got planned. And as far as the other side is concerned, it's going to look, like Sarah said, it's going to look very different than what it looks like now, probably. But none of us know that, and none of us can know what it's going to look like or whether it's going to be a slow ramp up or they flick a light switch, like Dave just said. I just need to keep a core staff of people together, make sure they're paid enough that they're going to stay with me and that they have a good enough work environment, that this is the right option for them and they have a good work-life balance, and that we keep throwing a great dinner party that everybody wants to come to. And, but the dinner party I threw in 2020 was very different than the dinner party I threw in 2005. Different food, different style of service, different things happen. Well, that's just going to happen a little bit faster. I will tell you one thing, though. Cost of dining out is going to go up, and it's going to go up more than it's already gone up. And so one of the things that's going to change about dining is the cost of doing all the things we need to do to keep it open is huge. There were people who were underpaid in the restaurant business before, who worked in the kitchen. Front of house wasn't underpaid. And so that people tell you that tipped employees is a waiter minimum wage. Waiters and bartenders are the best paid people in retail. But that wasn't the problem. There were a lot of people who were underpaid. Well, they're not underpaid anymore, and they're never going to be underpaid again. And that's probably a good thing. But I believe the cost of dining out at a standalone restaurant, once the market is clear, because right now there's a lot of dead man walking out there. There's a lot of dead man walking. There are restaurants that are not viable that are still open and closing and serving food. But when they lose October, November, and December, they're not going to be able to have, blue sky on their balance sheets anymore and pretend like they're profitable, because the reality is going to hit them. So when they're gone, and the ones that say, well, I'm not raising prices. Okay, well, they're going to be gone. I think dining is going to go up by about 40%. I think you're going to see dining across the board on all levels go up about 40%. And so, I don't know if that means that people are just going to be willing to pay more. They dine out 2 nights a week instead of 4 nights a week. But it's going to be 40% more expensive, and there's nothing that anybody can do about that. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
Lessons learned perspective, I would say two things. I've learned to continue to be humble as a leader and to take care of others. And I think it's so important now because so many people are suffering at home during this pandemic. And you see that with your employees. You see that just walking down the street with others, people fighting all the time. Suicide rate is up exponentially. So to continue to take care of others is so critically important. And the more you take care of others, I'm a big believer in karma. The more you get back yourself. So it's what comes around goes around. And remember to continue to take care of others.
Leadership to me is just the constant pursuit of doing things the very best we can for our customers. I think the most important role of the CEO is managing people.